There's a difference between enjoying to go somewhere versus needing to go somewhere because that's where your happiness is located. Welcome back to one's journey of unwinding the mind and, of course, your daily microdose. Now tune in to the latest episode of One's Journey. Oh, today I want to talk about travel, this new movement of being nomads, traveling the world, not having a place to call home, but just like constantly on the move. Okay, let me give you a little bit of backstory. So I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and she was really talking about how she just went on some travels that opened her up to realize that she had been seeking outside of herself, that she had been seeking her salvation. She had placed her happiness backpack outside of herself, and that going to these different locations and the experiences she had allowed her to remember where her truth was, which was within. So now she has returned from her travels, and she's talking about how difficult it is to reacclimate with those individuals who, though she changed, none of them have changed. And I totally get that. I mean, that is one of the hardest things at the beginning of a journey of personal development and healing is to then go back around those that know you as the person prior or that maybe took part in some of your healing until it isn't, until you realize that, in fact, do people actually change, or is it your perception of them that changes? There's a whole video about that. I encourage you to go check that out. That is a phenomenal, mind-blowing concept. That's not the concept today. So she's talking about how difficult that is, and then immediately talks about the need to move, the need to go travel, and how some of these locations she visited really contain the energy and the ability for her to love herself, to really reflect the version of herself that she wants to be. And I love this friend dearly, and I'm able to openly question her and provide her feedback. That's really how our relationship is. And I said to her, I said, hey, can I give you a little perspective on that? And she said, yeah. I said, well, it's interesting that you told me these travels helped you to see where true happiness and salvation lies, which is within, and I 100% agree with that. But then in the next sentence, you talk about how difficult it is to be home and that you need to go move somewhere because those are the places that you can truly be yourself. And I said, what I'm hearing is that, in fact, you believe these locations contain your happiness backpack. And she's like, oh my gosh, you're right. And then I had this epiphany. And, you know, I'm guilty of it too, because when she was telling me about her travels, all of a sudden it took me over. Placing my happiness backpack in traveling. All of a sudden I was sitting here, I'm like, oh my gosh, like what are Patrick and I doing? Like as soon as I got off this call with her, I'm telling him we're packing up our bags and we're just like setting out and we're going to go travel and we're going to go do the things we love because that's where my salvation lies. I mean, I didn't say that's where my salvation lies, but I had to talk myself through this in this conversation with my friend of like, whoa, hold the bus. Who decided to hand over that happiness backpack? But I could feel it. I could feel the intensity of her belief that her happiness backpack was locating these things. And I started to believe it too, even though I had unpacked it a lot. But I used to believe that. I used to greatly believe that in travel, in Europe, is where my happiness belonged. But it's not. Do I love going to Europe? Yes, I do. But there's a difference between enjoying to go somewhere versus needing to go somewhere because that's where your happiness is located. So the epiphany I had was, oh my gosh. So I explained to her that the interesting thing about travel, if you've ever heard, if you want to expand your creativity or you have some sort of block, go travel. Because just the changing of location and all of that just sparks a new perspective. But one of the great things travel is it's a place of surrender. And it's not a surrender you necessarily choose. It's a surrender that happens to you because you're not in control. When you're living at home, you're pretty in control of most things. You know how things operate where you live day to day. You're very familiar with the routines and all. It's pretty like routined, I guess you could say. Things can be expected when they're going to happen, blah, blah, blah. But when you go travel, so many unexpected things can happen, and a lot of them are completely out of your control. What happens? Of course, your perspective is in your control. So check out that video. Your perspective is your greatest control. But what that does is it puts you in that place of surrender. And I recorded a video earlier today, The Chosen, and I talked about surrender, and that is the place where we finally release the fear. We finally let go of choosing the ego because we've tried it and it's not working. So that place of surrender is the place where love comes through, where we can fully feel our innate state of unconditional love because we're not choosing to grab onto something else. Instead, we're just like, here I am. Travel does that, even in the smallest doses. So you get to experience you get to experience the truth that is unconditional love. And that's where it comes into being nomads and lifelong travelers and living out of vans and constantly moving from place to place. I'm not saying this is the case for everyone, but a lot of times what happens is when we're in a place for so long, you start to get those routines and stuff again. It starts to become predictable. So it's no longer putting you in that place of surrender and unpredictability where you have to allow to just trust. And so then you stop experiencing yourself and you go back into the ego of constantly being in the state of fear and control and knowingness. So then it's time to go to the next place. And then the next place. And then the next place. And then the next place. So there is a fine line between just enjoying travel versus needing travel in order to fully feel love, to fully feel whole. Because I promise you, the travel is not providing it to you. And eventually the other shoe will drop because you are choosing the ego. And it's giving you this false sense of security, this false sense of self-love that is ever fleeting. It doesn't last. That's why you have to constantly be moving and moving and moving and moving. That's why new things are so exciting. That's why people start new hobbies. That's why people cheat on their spouses, because the newness in the unpredictability of things forces that surrender. That is where your true self lies, in the space of surrender. So the trick is really finding that space, remembering that space by doing the internal work. But I bring this up because today we've become, everybody's working, remotely and traveling constantly. And it's the next addiction we have found, the next dopamine hits, because every time you go someplace new and you go into these surrenders, it's also a dopamine hit because it's that constant like, what's going to happen? I don't know what's going to happen. It's that edge of the seat moment, adrenaline rushes, and that's what we're seeking. But it's not really what you're seeking. What you're really seeking is your innate state, which is unconditional love. And the only way to get there is to go within, to stop ignoring where it truly is. And it's within. It's not out in Paris as much as I want to believe it is. It's not living on a sailboat as much as Patrick and I both want to believe it is. It's always within. And when you find it within, travel is fun, but you don't need it. And if it doesn't go the way you expect it doesn't matter. If it doesn't happen, it's not the end of the world. And it becomes a whole new ball game. So my question to you is, friend, do you find yourself being one of those people that constantly needs a new distraction in their life to bring you to that place of surrender instead of you finding it yourself and that constant dopamine hit and realizing that true happiness is within, and you can't say that and then place it on something outside of yourself, like that that doesn't equate. It's one or the other. It cannot be both. Just like fear and love cannot coexist. It cannot be outside and within. It is one or the other, or is neither. And it is always within. I promise you that. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope this was helpful in how you are using travel as a distraction instead of just another one of those things we do in the illusion to have a happy dream. So as always, make sure to like, subscribe, turn on notifications. And if you are interested, hop on the Patreon, Right-Minded Thinker, the highest tier. We have live discussions once a month, and they are jam-packed with amazingness, and I would love to see you there, and I'm sure Patrick would as well. But as always, thank you for tuning in, and remember, you are worth it. Much love. Bye-bye.